So, good afternoon and welcome to the 35th CALLERLAB Convention. Today is March 17th and this is the Inside the Definition session. I am Clark Baker and I'm moderating, and your panelist today is Bill Harrison. And with these shorter sessions, pretty much we have both people do both parts of it, so we'll both be doing some talking and stuff. I have a handout that's going around. The handout's also available on the web if we run out of them, and all my talks are available on my website, and I have a business card if you need to find that, or you just Google Clark Baker and it's like the first hit or something. What did I do wrong? I didn't quality check it. Oh, hold on. Uh-oh, I'm worried. Yeah, oh, is Inside the Definitions just page 1? Oh. Well, this is unfortunate. This is what happens when you do it yourself. So, for everyone, you have the first page of the talk, and the rest is on the website. Or maybe I just messed up some of them. It was late at night. I'm also giving a digital music presentation, and yeah, it's not supposed to be that. That's a problem. I'm sorry about that. Oh, and that could be a problem for me giving the talk. Give me one moment here. Oh, you have the talk on your laptop. Thank you. So let me sit down and just do this for a sec. How many of you attended the same talk a year ago? Great. That was like Randy. And Randy added a lot last year, so. For most of this talk, we're going to be talking about mainstream and plus calls. And we picked a bunch of calls that we hear questions on, or you guys might have questions, and we can do those, or we can be guided by whatever stuff you want to talk about. Before we get started with delving into specific calls, I want to explain the current organizational structure of definitions and calls and so forth inside CALLERLAB. And then I have a few comments on definitions, and then we can get into the meat of the talk. Copies of our current definitions can be found on the CALLERLAB website. And the definitions include formation, styling, and timing, and they're maintained by the Definitions Committee. If the Definitions Committee has a suggestion for some change to a call, that gets approved by the appropriate dance committee. For example, if we get a comment in that our definition of spin chain and exchange the gears isn't very understandable and we try to improve it somehow, then that would go to the plus committee, and then they get to discuss and vote on it. So each dance committee owns its own definitions, but most of the work on the definitions is done in the Definitions Committee. The Definitions Committee is open to anybody, and there's a Definitions Committee meeting later, and you're welcome to come and participate. And even if you just want to do mainstream definitions or plus definitions, there's ways of being on the committee and not receiving all the mail that relates to the other dance programs that you either don't know or don't have an interest in. The mainstream definitions are kind of special because starting in about 1998, they are undergoing a complete rewrite. It's the first time that's happened. There was enough stuff wrong with it, and they were the first definitions done within CALLERLAB that was felt starting from scratch would be better than trying to fix each little thing that's wrong one kind of call at a time. And that rewrite involves the Definitions Committee, and there's actually a whole separate piece called the Mainstream Rewrite part of the Definitions Committee. And you can be on that and not on anything else if you want. And that thing that's working on the definitions rewrite, the mainstream rewrite, you don't even have to be a CALLERLAB member. I was given special permission to draw on anybody I know or who asks me in the world who thinks they have expertise to help out there. So we have a bunch of dancers and people who do wordsmithing and stuff who are contributing there. And you're welcome to be on that piece if you want. This rewrite has taken a lot longer than anyone anticipated. But the process is the definitions rewrite for the mainstream, comes up with something, it gets approved by them, it goes to the mainstream committee, who immediately gives it to their ad hoc subcommittee headed by Lanny Weekland and his group of people who presumably all have mainstream expertise and sensibilities, reviews what's been done, makes some changes, hopefully not, but if they need to, they do. And when they vote and approve everything, it then goes to the mainstream committee as a whole, and they just get an up or down vote on each call. So the idea was to shield the entire mainstream committee, which is pretty large and may not have all that much interest in the nuances of mainstream definitions, from having to worry about that. That's why the subcommittee was formed. And we are at the point where I think within 1 month of now, we will have approved and be able to publish the first 29 calls that were given to the mainstream committee in 2003, plus the next 5 calls that were given to the mainstream committee in 2005. And all that's gone through all the processes, and there's been a large startup transient as Lanny got his subcommittee going and they all figured out what's going on. And hopefully future calls will go through a little bit quicker. So that's happening. And sometimes you'll hear me, maybe even today, say our current definition says this, but the rewrite is likely to say something like, and I'll tell you what the new thing is. A lot of the mainstream rewrite was based on comments that had been collected from the European Callers and Teachers Association, who sent CALLERLAB a letter with 4 or 6 pages of problems they were having with our definitions, and that was sent in the late 90s, I believe. Or that I've collected through discussions on the Square Dance Callers list on the internet, for example. So now we have definitions. And you could think of definitions potentially as the way we make laws, maybe in the United States, the legislative body. But who interprets the laws? And that is the ARC committee, the Applications Review Committee, headed by John Jones with Jerry Story as its vice chairman. And they are a reactive committee. If someone writes them a letter, and they need to have a letter and have it signed so they know who it is. They won't distribute your name, but they do themselves want to know that it's just not spam or something. But if you write into them and say, is it proper to call Boys Run from a Boy Boy Girl Girl Ocean Wave, then they will send that out to their committee, discuss it here at convention. We just did that earlier this morning. And then discuss it again in their committee and vote and publish a ruling that says it's either proper or improper, and they often will give you some explanation as the thought process or why. All of those results have been collected together. They've been operating since early in the 2000s, I think, and all their results have been collected together and are available on the CALLERLAB website. And they make interesting reading, especially if you're interested in definitions and applications and so forth. So that's the long-winded summary of how definitions and everything works at CALLERLAB. Are there any questions there? Anything, or can I go forward? Remember that everything is on the mic, and we will have Mike Boy here pass the mic around. And we don't have any questions that I see. Moving, and that's evolved into the ever-changing pattern calling that we have today based on a mainstream vocabulary of about 100 phrases. I know we only have 70 calls, but there's more that we say. By the 1950s, the new dancers had to take a short series of lessons to become familiar, and by the end of the 60s, square dancing had evolved into what was documented in the Sets in Order magazines, the Basic 50 and Extended 75. That's what I was first exposed to. And then each booklet contained a list of calls along with some definitions which included pictures and diagrams of how to do these calls. In the 1970s, CALLERLAB standardized the mainstream dance program, the so-called mainstream list, and then soon after created a set of definitions, which took at least 13 drafts and a tremendous amount of work, given that we didn't have computers and email back then. A separate committee developed styling, and another committee developed timing. And then later there have been slight changes to that over the years, but mostly they've remained unchanged from what was first set down. I bet that would be the mid to late 70s. The current definitions are published with the styling, timing, and definitions all combined together. So typically a dancer learns this stuff from a caller who stands up and teaches with talking and walkthroughs and demonstrations. And in addition, we all have danced a lot as callers. We may have witnessed other callers teaching. How we think and know about what a call is not so much what's written down on paper, but what's our dance experience is as we've been a dancer and a caller dancing to other callers. Perhaps we attend the national convention and see what people are doing there. So pretty much we know what a call is internally. We've internalized something. We've seen examples. Occasionally we'll see people do something that we don't like or we think is wrong or improper. But how do you know something's wrong? You can look at it on paper, or you can just base it on your own knowledge of what you've seen or how you think about the call. I'm sure we'll end up coming back to this point a little bit. So our definitions are attempt to capture the essence of each call, that internal knowledge that you know to be true about it. And they tend to be a bit more formal than how you would hear a call taught, or if you hear dancers talking about a call, or if you have to remind a dancer how to do a call. So each of the terms in the definitions that we write should be either in English language that makes sense to anyone off the street, and our early calls have to be done that way because we don't have any vocabulary to base it on, or a term defined somewhere, usually a previous call. If we have the idea of turning half by the right and turning half by the left, or trading by the right and by the left, somewhere, then we could define swing through as those who can turn half by the right and those who can turn half by the left. Of course, we still have to be careful to make sure we limit it to a four-dancer call. Otherwise, if we just took those words and we had a tidal wave, people would be doing a grand swing through. So my big point number one is that the words that are best used while teaching a call can be very different from those used to formally define a call, which means if you're teaching, I don't necessarily recommend that you go to the definitions, pick it up, and read verbatim to the dancer. It's going to sound like gobbledygook to them. And an example of that might be Past the Ocean. Our definition of Past the Ocean says that it has three parts, or at least the definition's given in three parts. And it's pass through, quarter in, or face your partner. We don't have quarter in necessarily as a technical term there, but face your partner or face in, and step to a wave. But we know it feels differently in dancing than that. And we also know we often call it with a boy on the left and the girl on the right, and we ask the girls as they're going by, you can smooth this out into a left arm hook or whatever. And some even teach it that way. Some don't. But if you just got up with a group of people and you know, heads lead right, circle to a line, pass through, and everyone do the last two parts of Past the Ocean, I mean, no one's going to know what to do because they don't. The definition doesn't match the way you think about it and dance it generally. And that happens. That happens on some calls. The second point is the words that are best used to cue the dancers through a call or help them may be very different than those used to define a call. And one of the ones I'm thinking of is linear cycle. So everyone seems to chant with linear cycle, hinge, fold, follow, peel. That's kind of the mantra, the way to quickly remember it. And that's a 4-part mantra. And since this is inside the definitions, how many parts does linear cycle have? 3. So isn't that weird that we have a 4-part mantra, which is the easy way to remember and dance the call, and yet the definition has 3 parts? You probably wouldn't want to take advantage of those 3 parts unless you were calling to a group who really cares about that thing, or, you know, up in one of the C levels or something could programs, the challenge programs. Okay. That's a good place to pause. You guys still awake and this is going on okay? Anyone have a comment? Yeah, okay. Here's a question.
Wait a minute. Let me give you this.
You're going to get a mic and you're going to have to state your name and where you're from.
Yes. Henry Grissett, Los Angeles. I'm just curious, is it 3 parts to linear cycle?
Correct. 3 parts to linear cycle.
What's that? What's the working definition of it?
You ask a good question. Give me a moment. Did Bill bring a paper set of definitions, or I can bring them up on my laptop?
I don't think I might have them.
I'm betting, here's what I'm betting they are, but we're going to look it up in a second to see if I'm right. I'm betting the initial part is hinge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the next part is the outfacer folds, and they all do a double pass through, and they remain offset. That's part 2. And then the third part is a peel off toward the, what I think of as the warm hand, toward the inside, toward the right if it was right-handed. Is the hinge and fold the first part?
Oh, the hinge and, okay. So
I'm sorry. So hinge and the one looking out fold.
The fold is considered part of the
part
first
1.
part. Okay. All right. That's what I was wondering about, because I would consider that 4 parts.
Right. And the only reason it has those parts is probably that's the way it always was, or it was way back when, before we ever had the 4-part mantra. I don't know many people who take advantage of 1/3 linear cycle. I do know people who take advantage of 2/3 linear cycle, and people who take advantage of do the last 1/3 of a linear cycle. Bill's going to make a comment right behind you.
Yes, and the higher up in the programs you go, like in the C1 program, there's a concept called finish. So if you did a finish linear cycle, a finish means the first part's gone. So that means the hinge and the fold would be taken away. So you already have to be in that setup, and then you can now finish a linear cycle. That's what finish means. So all of a sudden the definition of the call actually becomes even more so important later in life as far as the dance programs go.
Okay. Moving on.
Any other questions?
I want to lay some groundwork that we do in definitions. And not everyone thinks this is the right way to do definitions, but it's the way they've been done in CALLERLAB and most other places for a while. Let's talk about the call right and left throw. What are all the possible starting positions for right and left throw? Let's say you have 8 dancers. Heads square from a squared set. Heads or sides can do it. Let's say we had lines facing. Everyone can do a right and left through. From an 8-chain position, everyone can right and left through. From a trade by, the centers can do it. From a beginning double pass through, the centers can do it. From ocean waves, right-hand ocean waves, everyone can do it. From a quarter tag, the centers could do it. From after a heads right and left through and stay in the middle, the heads in the middle could do it again. In other words, that's a T-bone setup where the sides are kind of inactive on the outside. So the point is there's a lot of places. From a tidal wave, we could do it. And I'll give you an even weirder one. Can I have 4 people, 2 women and 2 men, stand up in the middle there for a second? Make normal couples. There is 1 man. 2 men and 1 woman. Yeah, facing couples would be good. Okay, and one of you is going to have to play a girl. Could we have normal facing couples? Or as normal as we can get? Thank you. And the 2 dancers nearest me do a touch, step to right hands. So here's a position that we don't have a good name for in our CALLERLAB formations yet, but this could be a proper starting formation for right and left through, or square through, or swing through, or many of our calls. This would be uncommon or unusual, but do a right and left through. Okay? And for right now, we'll stop there. You guys can sit down. Thank you. So the point is, if we had to list, we like to say where the calls are done from in our definition. One thing that helps you is when you're reading the definition, pick a popular starting place and use that in your mind, and as you're reading through the action, you can think about how you'd be doing that. If I just gave you a call and said, here's a call, and it works like this. You do a trade, and then the centers walk and dodge, and then if you're a couple, you do a wheel and deal, and if you're in an ocean wave, you do a recycle. Where's that call done from? You'd have to start searching out. Does it work from a tidal wave? Does it work from ocean waves? Is it done from a squared set? That's no good. So we always give a set of starting positions, and you can think of one of those and follow the definition through. The starting positions, we don't want to have to keep listing all these things. So you want to list the fewest number of starting positions. And the way we accomplish that is instead of talking about right and left through as taking 8 dancers, because we always square dance with 8 dancers, we're going to talk about it as being a 4-dancer call. That's all you need to do right and left through, 4 dancers. And in fact, we're going to simplify it even further and say that it's normally done from facing couples. So there's only one starting position for right and left through, facing couples. Elsewhere in our definitions, in a preface part, we're going to talk about how even though we've defined it from a small place, you can have multiple occurrences of that small place, and that can count. So, for example, that allows right and left through to be done from lines facing, because we have 2 groups of 4 side by side, or from an 8 chain, 2 groups of 4 stacked in the other orientation. Do-si-do takes 2 dancers. We can do it from lines facing. You have 4 replications of that do-si-do. If you had from lines facing, centers face your partner, or centers face each other, turn and face each other, there's another unusual starting position for do-si-do. The ends are do-si-doing in front of them. The centers are do-si-doing in the east-west direction, but also in front of them. But it's 4 occurrences of the 2-dancer do-si-do formation. So we make use of that in doing our definitions. The second thing, and then what about right and left through from an ocean wave? There's a rule in the preface that talks about it's either the ocean wave rule or the facing couple rule. I can never remember that. And do you want to go back and hit Randy? That ocean wave rule allows us to say that some calls that start from facing couples can be done from an ocean wave, and that way we don't have to put even 2 formations down there. And that also allowed that odd thing that I defined right off the bat, the one where half of you were in an ocean wave and half of you were in facing dancers. Randy Doherty.
One of the resolutions coming up to vote on Wednesday is going to be getting rid of the glossary. Is the preface going to become a glossary type thing, or what, Clark?
In the mainstream rewrite, there is a section after the calls are defined, because the people complain that we want to start the definitions and get right into call number 1 pretty quick. So later in the document, there's a section that defines most of the term. Any term that's in the glossary that's used in the definitions, it's in the back of the new mainstream definitions. And that was one of the rationales. So things like quarter in, quarter out, leader, trailer, face in, face out, whatever you need to use as words to define calls is in the back of the new mainstream definitions. That's not called preface. I can tell you what it's called in a second, but it might be called defining terms or it's terminology we need, but I don't know. I don't remember. And if you look in the plus and especially the advanced definitions, they have a whole section of that which talks about terminology that we're going to use throughout this document. So just to make the definition shorter. So when we finally get through that, we can end up with right and left through is simply being starting formation, facing couples, dance action, right pull by, courtesy turn, ending formation, facing couples, timing, 6 steps. And that's pretty short and to the point. Hold it, he has a question. And you're about to say something.
I was. No, go ahead.
Name?
Ron Nelson from San Diego. What was I going to say? Now, in regards to the
starting formation, ocean wave, preface, the defining terms?
Defining terms. Courtesy turn then would be in the end?
If courtesy turn is not on our mainstream list, and I believe it's listed as a call on our mainstream list, it is. Therefore, it's going to have its own entry because it's a separate call on the list. It's interesting because it's not a call that's called very often by itself, but if it's on the list, it's defined as an entry on the thing. Bill had a comment. He's going to say something in just a moment.
Hello? Yes. What Clark was talking about earlier about in the preface, it says starting formations. I just thought I'd read it to you. Starting formations are listed for each of the defined calls. They are the most commonly occurring starting formations for the calls in use at the time these definitions were approved, but they are not necessarily the only possible starting formations given the dynamic nature of the square dance activity. So sometimes you can read a definition that says starting, just say it's facing couples. But obviously, like in the couple examples, there was some that were facing and some that were partially in a mini wave. We can still do that. So the argument would be that, yes, that's possible, just the definitions didn't give all of the possibilities of the starting formation.
Okay. So when we define things, we try to do it from the smallest place possible, and we try to be pretty brief. Not everybody likes that. Some comments that come in the definitions committee is that every call should be standalone. If you just picked some call out of our definitions, like if you're reading Burleson, you should be able to read it, and it's self-contained. It doesn't refer to any other calls or any other ideas. You could just read it and understand it. But that would make our definitions pretty verbose, and generally no one's voted for that except for the one or two people who keep asking for it. Okay. We are now on to any of the issues that have been brought up to us or anything you guys want to talk about. If there's something specific people want to talk about, we should cover that first. If not, I'm interested in talking about tag the line and extend the tag, because I think there's confusion in that area. And there's a few other things like that. But here we have a question. Randy again.
Randy Doherty, Mesa, Arizona. Can you elaborate on the courtesy turn, since we were talking about it? If you were in a static square and the caller was to say heads courtesy turn, what is the ending formation?
Isn't that a good question? So the way we answer these things initially is to go look up courtesy turn, which is number 16. It says starting formation, a couple, or facing dancers. I'm reading from our current approved things. I'll talk about the new ones in a second. It says that it's limited at mainstream to a couple with a man on the left, woman on the right. The man, left-hand dancer, takes a lady, right-hand dancer's left hand, palm down, in his left, palm up, and places his right hand in the small of the lady's back. Working as a unit, the couple turns around with the left-hand dancer backing up and the right-hand dancer walking forward. And here's the part that gets to your answer. Unless otherwise specified, the couple faces the center of the set or the center of the formation in which it is working. And that's trying to cover a bunch of cases and probably doesn't always answer the question or give you a specific thing. Because what if the center of where you're working is not the same as the center of the set? You kind of have two choices. And how do you know what the center of the group you're working in is? So on chain down the line, I think it's a four-dancer call, and the courtesy turn on chain down the line ends, in facing couples on that group. From a squared set, if you were to courtesy turn, you'd go, I always think a courtesy turn is 180 or often 180 degrees, and I would like to have stopped looking out. And yet here our definition says that you turn to get the center of the set, so it seemed to be, the answer would be 360 degrees. And I think the real answer is, this call was not written to handle that application. Back in 1974, when someone wrote that courtesy turn definition, no one was asking questions like what you're asking right now.
Exactly. And if we do use that, if we say heads courtesy turn, they're in a club in the United States that does a full courtesy turn because we don't elaborate on our definition. But that's why I'm wondering why we're having these definitions that do that kind of thing, but yet in dance reality, in real world, the dancers think it's always half. Now, they almost got chain down the line figured out because that's a three-quarter turn. But if you have lines facing and you say the in lady's diagonally chained, do you want a line after that or do you want them cattywampus at the 45? Because they're working on a diagonal. They're going to be tilted according to your definition. How do we clean up the mess we've created?
It's not my definition.
Well, I know, but how can we clean up our mess that we've made, I think?
So when people ask about mainstream definition questions like this, and be aware and pull me into the right direction if we get too far off track, this is supposed to be a talk on inside the definitions from the aspect if someone says, is there such a call as left scoot back? Or is there something like, is there ever left to spin the top? Or where does Do Paso end? Where does Do Paso end? Ends with a courtesy turn. That was news to me because I was never taught that way, but as I came into square dancing in the CALLERLAB definitions, lo and behold, it has that little line there. If I Alaman left in the Alamo style and balance and say, boys run, what direction do they run? Why do they run to the right? It actually says that. Someone put a line in our definition that says from an Alamo ring, runs are to the right unless otherwise specified. In computer science, we'd call that a default. It's unusual to have something like that in there. I didn't know that was in there. If you were giving me a trivia quiz, even though I'm supposed to know about the definitions, often when you ask me something, I go based on my internal knowledge, not what we have in writing. It's when what's in writing doesn't match our internal knowledge that we have trouble. And that's what Randy's saying. So to get back to that, what does our proposed new definition that the Definitions Committee on the Mainstream Rewrite half is working on say today? This hasn't been approved. It may not come out like this, but I would hope that almost every question and complaint you have on the mainstream definitions today is answered in the mainstream rewrite. And it says, courtesy turn, starting formation, normal couple, or anywhere a man is approximately facing a woman who is approaching him with her left hand available. That's a lot of words, but that happens on courtesy turn. Otherwise, how can a lady's chain be a lady's right pull by in courtesy turn? You aren't even in a couple or any starting formation. There are times when a lady is coming toward a guy with her left hand available where you can tell to that guy, courtesy turn the girl, and you'll do it. So we have to cover that case, and the new definition tries to cover that in our starting thing. The new definitions, as you're mostly aware, have command examples. These are what the dancers might hear. These are what the caller might say. Pass through, courtesy turn. Square through 3, courtesy turn. Women square through 3. Men reach out and courtesy turn them. That's the one where they're doing it in the middle. Walk and dodge, courtesy turn. Heads pass through, courtesy turn and a quarter more. Girls connect to make a 2-hand star, 1 full turn. Boys, courtesy turn your girl. That's a piece of calling or choreography I've heard and others have heard and called. It's in there. All 4 ladies make a right-hand star. Move it. Boys, courtesy turn your own girl. Boys circulate. Girls scoot back. Courtesy turn. That would be from a right-hand 2-face line thing with the boys on the end. Girls touch a quarter. Scoot back. Boys reach out and courtesy turn the girl in front of you. That would be from a beginning double pass-through with girls in the center. So those are the command examples. Now, they aren't meant to give you like extended applications, but these are ways and things that the call is properly in use. You ought to be aware of it. It's in the definitions now. We never had that before. Next section, dance action. If necessary, dancers form a couple using the handholds described below. The couple, using the handholds described below, wow, it sounds kind of redundant, will work as a unit and turn around with the man backing up and the woman walking forward. The turning point is exactly between the dancers. The distance turned will usually meet the following criteria. The couple is facing another couple. In all cases where the woman comes toward the man, the couple will end facing from where she came. All couples have turned the same amount. The couples will have turned between 180 and 270 degrees. The ending formation is a couple. Timing is 4. The styling you don't care about. But then there's another section called comments. And comments are a way that we can keep the definitions relatively short and uncluttered, but still add little fixes and other things you might ask about at the bottom. And the comments are, courtesy turn is mainly used to define and teach calls like ladies chain, chain down the line, right and left through, Do Paso, and 8 chain through. Occasionally, it is used as a call by itself. The phrase, and a quarter more, is occasionally used after a courtesy turn or call ending with a courtesy turn, for example, right and left through and a quarter more. The dancers will courtesy turn an extra 90 degrees, usually ending in a right-hand 2-face line. Calls that can end in a squared set with a courtesy turn action, for example, 4 ladies chain or Do Paso, can easily blend into other, say it better. Calls that can end in a squared set with a courtesy turn action can easily blend into each other, into a turning partner left or into an Alaman Thar. See Part 4, additional detail, dance action, blending one call into another. So that's not said very well as I'm reading it out loud to you. But what I'm trying to say is there's times when you can say 4 ladies chain them back, Do Paso, it's partner left. Now, some callers believe that's incorrect calling and that you shouldn't say chain them back because that implies a full completion of this call and you can't start Do Paso from a squared set. You can, but it doesn't feel good. And they'd prefer to have you, star the ladies back or something, or have the ladies make a star and boys turn them. This document acknowledges several cases where we blend the end action of one call into the beginning action of another. Whether those all see approval through the mainstream committee remains to be seen, but I know that is in current calling today a lot. And the final comment was, in dance programs beyond mainstream, this definition is generalized to allow any left side dancer to courtesy turn any right side dancer. That is, same gender and half sashayed courtesy turns. So that's the new full-blown thing on courtesy turn. I don't know if that, meets with most people's. Is it better than what we had before? Does it cover all the cases? Does it actually cover Randy's? What does it say from a squared set with everyone looking in? And I think the answer is you're right. It doesn't cover that. It talks about a courtesy turn being usually 180 or 270, and it said you normally face someone. Go ahead.
Well, the rewrite doesn't really say anything about both issues that I brought up, from a static square or from a line facing in, having the in ladies diagonally chain. Are they turning 225 degrees now? Because by your rewrite definition, that's what they do. If you're going to follow it by the definition, which a lot of the foreign markets, they have to interpret what we put down literally. We got nobody doing it that way that I can see.
I think it covers the ladies diagonally chain, in that it said that the amount of the courtesy turn is, I've lost it. It said between 180 and 270 degrees. See, some people think the courtesy turn on a chain down the line is 270. But it didn't come right out and say courtesy turns unless otherwise specified are 180 degrees. I believe in the definition committee discussion we had that statement, and that was kind of voted down. Not everyone agrees that a courtesy turn is always 180 degrees unless otherwise specified. So this is the best we've come up with. But maybe it's not good enough. And I don't think this has gone out for approval yet or whatever. So we have another question.
So what is the answer?
I think the answer is that it's still, even with a new rewrite, isn't good enough.
I think we should, when Flutterwheel was originally written, the author never had intentions of the forearm. Flutterwheel, by the original author, was something totally different than what we got today. And it was single file, and then it came kind of a star, and then eventually it became the forearm. But it was the dancers that more or less told the callers how we like to dance Flutterwheel. And I think this courtesy turn thing, if we're going to eliminate where it has to face the center of the formation, it would really eliminate a lot of confusion. If a caller says heads courtesy turn, and he wants them to go 360, he better say it. Otherwise, I think it should be considered a 180 call. Just like wheel around, there's no doubt on a wheel around, it's always 180 with no exception. The courtesy turn can be 180 to 270, I would think, or 360. If you have the head ladies chain across, that's a 360 type situation. So I think we need to fit some of our definitions to fit what the dancers really like or what they expect, the anticipated response.
I'm not convinced that it's that big a problem on the ladies' chain thing, because if you think about diagonal boxes, like a J box, a two-face line in the middle quarter, if you asked two ladies to chain in each diagonal box, you wouldn't expect them to end in a static square. You'd expect them to be back in your facing diagonal boxes. And I would view lines of 4 in that same regard. If I'm starting in lines of 4 and I ask the in ladies to chain, then I'm going to regard that as a J box or something like that, and I'm going to expect the dancers. I don't know what the ruling is on it. I'm just telling you what I would expect.
And that's what the dancers would do.
So that was Jerry's story speaking.
I'm not sure that it's a real problem myself that would take tweaking the definition. I mean, there's God plenty of words in the definition now. So I don't know how you could do it without making more words, and that's what we don't need is more words in the definition.
So far as I see it, it answers everything except for the original question of if I'm from a static square.
Yes, Ron Nelson again. I'm wondering if, the primary responsibility of a square dance caller is to communicate to the dancers what it is he wants them to do. And so you can do that as an addendum to whatever the written part of that call is. And if you effectively communicate it, there may be other things that we haven't looked at yet or know that someone is one of these geniuses right here that come up with that you can do differently. So I think the simple definition is simply sufficient.
So taking a step back from this issue, it shows an interesting, I don't know if trap or conundrum we have ourselves in. We kind of agree, well, first off, this came about as a folk art, and it was just passed from caller to caller and dancer to dancer, and probably different areas dance things differently. And then someone started writing down some relatively simple definitions. You can go back to old dance books, around the turn of the last century and see people trying to describe how dancing works for the different dance masters that traveled around. And the more we've tried to make it specific, well, frankly, as modern Western became precise where every call has a starting position and ending position, we're left with a certain set of calls that were never that technically precise, of which courtesy turn, if you look in the traditional squares or contradance world of how they use courtesy turn, they're much more loose and fluid with the ladies' chains and the courtesy turns than we are. Even them if I make a circle of 4, if I have heads go forward and back and heads circle left 3/4, where do we end? A beginning double pass-through formation. Okay, in case you weren't following that, heads forward and back, heads make a circle of 4 and circle left 3/4. In the modern Western world, we end in a specific beginning double pass-through formation. In other words, those dancers in the circle know who their partner is, the dancer beside them. In the contradance world, if I had, heads go in and circle left 3/4, they could be where we think they are. They could be all 4 facing the flagpole center of their star, or they could be quartered in from where we think they are, facing the other person as a partner. Because the circling action brings them around, if I said 3/4, 3 positions on the floor, but says absolutely nothing about which way their body's facing. So they're less precise in that world than we are in ours. And the fact that we've gotten that precise, and then we take some of what I think of as the fudgy calls, the Do Pasos, the courtesy turns and stuff, and add on top of that the creativity of a caller who can do, hey, I can have the head ladies chain across, and I can chain them diagonally, and in the old days we could chain them down the line, right? That's something that we're losing in our glossary of there's chain across the line and chain down the line. That's the chain down the line. That's not the call that Don Beck evolved out of his knowledge of that, but the way we do it in traditional dancing. We're going to get hung as soon as we publish definitions, and then someone says, now what does that really allow me to do? If the call says this and this and this, and lo and behold, I can do linear cycle from someplace we've never thought of. It's people interpreting calls from places that have never been thought of before that can get us in trouble. Sometimes those are very clever and the dancers do it and everyone goes, wow, that's really neat. And sometimes it's just kind of bad judgment or bad taste. A close example of that could be spin chain the gears from a tidal wave. When that first came out as an idea, some people liked it, some people didn't. It seemed like you could apply the words of our definition pretty closely and have that thing work. But do the dancers like it? You could use that in a workshop tip and give it a try. And it's the ARC group that makes rulings on this stuff. So, they're kind of the right people to be asking, is it proper to do spin chain the gears from a tidal wave, for example? What I was hoping to look for here today is stuff that's in our existing definitions that's not controversial, but perhaps you hadn't encountered or seen that before. But it often doesn't stay that way. It gets into these other weird corner cases. Is there another call that we want to look at or talk about, or should I pick something off my list? We have at least 2 hands.
Henry Grissett again. Crossfire is one that I have a question about. I think the working definition or the usable definition sort of says that the centers trade and extend or step through, and the ends cross fold. And depending on the formation you use it from, you either get a beginning double pass through if you're doing it from a two-face line. I mean, from lines facing out, or do you get a quarter tag when you have the centers extend?
Okay. So let me read you the definition. And there's a lot to say on this call. Crossfire is on the plus list. It says starting formation is two-faced line, parallel lines of 4, inverted line, paren S, line or lines, and the timing is 6 beats. As the centers begin to trade, the ends cross-fold. Upon completing their trade, the centers release hands and step straight forward, forming an ocean wave or mini wave with the dancers they are facing. If the trade leaves the original centers facing no one, they step forward and remain facing out. And then there's some styling. We need to demonstrate several things here. So let's start with one two-face line, a 4-dancer right-hand two-face line. And I don't care about the genders in this case.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. So to do this call, and this is the one everyone knows and teaches first, crossfire, the centers trade, the ends cross fold, and there's a little step forward thing, and there you go. Everyone's happy with that, right? And there's a question here that Art has.
You're just saying step forward. I thought the definition said extend, as it currently exists, and extend means...
Let me check here. It goes blah, blah, the centers release handhold. The centers release handholds and step straight forward, forming an ocean wave or mini wave with the dancers they are facing.
Yes.
So the definition is very carefully crafted and does not have the word extend. It has step forward, and it says if they end facing, it also says if the trade leaves the original centers facing no one, they step forward. They step straight forward, forming an ocean wave or mini wave with the dancers they are facing.
It's not what it says now.
That's what I'm going by, Clark, is the definition I had said centers trade and extend, and the definition of extend at plus is if you can, you extend to a right-handed mini wave. And if you can't extend to a mini right wave, you just step forward. Everybody extends one more place, stepping forward.
Why? You want me to look up extend for you?
No, I'm not worried about extend. I'm more concerned with his statement of what the definition originally said. So the first thing I want to check is the revision history. And so I have a revision history from 2002 forward for the plus list, and I do not see any change to the definition of crossfire. So at least from 2002 on, it's been worded the way it is now. I agree that many people teach crossfire with an extend, and if I had to give a quick definition, I'd say centers trade and extend while the ends cross fold. But in the 90s, I can believe it might have said that, and I might be able to find something if I have a little more time to look it up. But it doesn't say that now in our CALLERLAB definitions. Would everyone hinge and have the boys hinge? So we have a facing diamond. This is another, I wouldn't say common, but this is another potential starting position for for crossfire. So we're going to have, you're asking me what you do, right? Yeah. I won't make you look stupid here, don't worry. We're going to have the ends, which are maybe considered the points, there is some controversy there, are going to cross-fold. You're kind of doing your part of a cross-fold. Just go about the same distance you would and end about the same way. Make sure you turn 2 walls. So you're good. That's good. Stop about there. While the centers trade And what do we say this? No, do a perfect trade. And then good. And then step forward. And you don't meet anybody. And we have a nice T-bone box here with the girls looking at the boy's ear. And you have 2 leaders and 2 trailers. Okay? 1/2 box circulate. Go to left hands. I'm just getting out of it. 1/2 box circulate. There you go. Okay, so those are 2 crossfires. I now need 4 more dancers. I want a square. And why don't you guys square up so we have part of a square? And I don't care about gender. Make lines of 4 facing. Pretend your square broke down and use our lost square procedure. Oh, look at that. Rejoin the dancing. Lines, go forward and back. Pass through. Okay. We want to talk about crossfire from here. And what do we say? The centers trade. That's great. Centers trade and the ends cross fold. And the centers, if they're facing someone, step forward to form a mini wave. And it ends here. Just for grins. Audience participation. How many people like the fact that this call ends in a quarter tag? Raise your hand. And the majority of the room has raised their hand. How many people unstep to a wave in the middle? So you're in a beginning double pass through. How many people would prefer that crossfire ends in this beginning double pass through? Raise your hand. And we see the 2C4 dancers and a few people in the back are hedging just a little bit. So the issue is some people believe that crossfire is a 4-dancer call. We talked about each call has a size. Almost all calls have a size. And that it would be wrong to have the dancers on this side who crossfire interact with the dancers on that side. But the way the call was developed and used generally around the country and the world, and hence codified into our definitions, had them end up in a quarter tag. So you're more properly in a quarter tag. So as a caller, you either follow the definition and end there, or you always remember to follow the next call with something that would create that wave, like swing through, go, or something like that. Extend the tag, linear cycle, pass through, crossfire. Okay, they got it. So there we did 2 of them. Extend the tag. Explode the wave. Wheel and deal and spread. We now have lines facing. Long lines go forward and come way back. Crossfire. Centers trade. The ends cross fold. And we're now in a completed double pass-through formation. So that was a case where the 2 boxes didn't have to interact. Okay. Could we have the ends face your partner and walk by?
They're all locked together.
Locally, my caller tends to use it from this position. So this is not the creative choreography session, but it always devolves into one. Let's follow the rules on crossfire from here. On a crossfire, the ends are going to cross-fold. You kind of can find a shoulder you're headed to while the centers trade. And, of course, if they're facing someone, they step to a wave. And it ends in what some people call an I-beam type formation. Is that a left or right shoulder pass on the cross-fold? Is that a honest question or a facetious question? Yeah. No, I understand. It's the shoulder passing on cross folds is a big issue. Let's get to that in a second. We'll hold that in abeyance. Okay. Are there any other cross folds that we need to show, or are there any more crossfires, or is that enough for right now? So the dancers can sit down, and we have a question on the side. Name?
Just what does the current definition say?
Current definition of?
Of crossfire.
Oh, I've read it. I'll read it again.
What's the very end?
Oh, hold on. Oh, it's a quarter tag. Chuck's question was, is the current definition of crossfire say it ends in a quarter tag? The answer is yes. Now, you may be interested to know, it'll take me too long to look it up, but probably in 2003, someone wrote into the definition committee and said, I don't like that crossfire from lines back to back ends in a quarter tag. Please fix it. Definition committee sent out a poll of its committee members and said how many people want to change this and how many people think it should stay the way it is. And I think it was like a 20 to 10 vote to keep it the way it is. So there's no change. So for better or worse, either everyone's used to doing it to end in a quarter tag, or everyone believes it goes in a quarter tag, and I think it's unlikely to ever get that changed. So that's good, because that's what the majority of you want. But if you wonder why there's people who kind of stick their tongue out or something each time you call crossfire from lines back to back, that's what's going on, is their mental model of how that call works is completely different, and they just think you don't understand, even though that's the way the documentation is. And they also believe CALLERLAB doesn't understand and stuff.
And the clarification is that in all other cases, it's a 4-dancer call, except for that lines back to back, it becomes an 8-dancer, and that's why you probably get the frowns and what have you.
Yeah, that's just a very unusual thing.
Yes.
This is Stephen Cole.
Stephen Cole from Tempe, Arizona. One of the things that was just explained to me by an advanced and challenged caller only, he doesn't call anything below that, is that every other application of that call ends in a column. And that's where I've heard the controversy start and end. It's like it's a column every other place except for there. Well, if you take a look at it, if you have lines facing in and you do a crossfire, it's a completed double pass through. It's columns.
Crossfire from a tidal line would end in,
tidal.
And as couples ocean wave, crossfire, you do it on each side.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm mistaken in that.
Yeah.
But that's what it was explained to me at, and I was like, oh, okay, I can live with that argument. But I have learned that if I call swing through or do something in the middle, that kind of eradicates that for those that might have a problem.
Okay, so we've covered crossfire mostly to death. We have one more.
Yeah, this is Dave Clay from Nottingham, England. It's being a little bit mischievous because it refers back to the linear cycle. But just to save any confusion, the first third of linear cycle is hinge. Nope.
Linear cycle. Part 1. The end and adjacent centers hinge. Part 2. Those facing out fold behind those facing in, and all dancers will then move forward in a double pass-through action. Part 3, if the hinge is right-handed, peel right. If the hinge is left-handed, peel left to end as facing couples. From a right-hand hinge, all will pass right shoulders. From a left-hand hinge, all will pass left shoulders. An added note for information from beyond the Plus program. From any inverted lines or some 3-in-1 lines, the passing rule shall prevail. Not applicable in the Plus program. So if we had an inverted line, those with right hands are hinging right, those with left hands are hinging left. They all do kind of an offset toward me, double pass through. The ones who hinged right peel right, the ones who hinge left peel left, and if you added a roll to that, they would all end in a couple following a couple. As I say, this is not the creative choreography session, but...
Yeah. So that means the examples we gave earlier on linear cycle, like the finish, instead of being what I actually said it was, the hinge and the outlooker fold, you have to be there. Basically, you just have to be in an ocean wave, and you can finish, because it's the outlooker fold, now complete double pass-through peel in that example. I don't remember what the other one was.
The other example?
Yeah.
So, should we move on to another call?
I like to talk about the word only.
Oh, only.
Yes.
In some of our definitions, I have to move back to Bill's laptop. Scroll.
Yeah. What we're talking about is in the definitions that we have already, there are some places where we have the word only. I think...
what does only mean?
Exactly.
For example, the starting formations for Past the Ocean says facing couples only. So I searched before I came here in preparation for this for the word only in pretty much, basic mainstream plus definitions. Seesaw says this call is to be used only in conjunction with walk around the corner. Courtesy turn says limited at mainstream to couples with man on left, woman on right. I took that as being only. Past the ocean, starting formation, facing couples only. Extend, starting formation, quarter tag formation only. This would be a basic. Mainstream, recycle, starting formation, ocean wave only. At plus, explode the wave from waves only. And at plus, linear cycle from waves only for the plus program. So what does only mean? Hopefully it's self-evident. It means that the dance program it's on, for example, why is recycle from ocean waves only? And the answer is because you can do it at facing couples from advanced. And if all you did was read the definitions and stop at mainstream, you might not know that there's an advanced thing, and you might go right and left through, starts here, or a bad example, swing through. That's the same one. What's one that works the other way? In other words, the point is you can't, to do a recycle, you can't just step to a wave first and then recycle.
Yeah, it's do-si-do to a wave, isn't it? Is that what you're looking for?
I want a call that starts from a wave that we do from facing couples.
Swing through.
Yes, swing through is an example. On swing through, if we do it from facing couples, we just step to a wave and do it.
Yes.
How come recycle from facing couples, we don't just step to a wave and do it?
Because there's a facing.
Because there's that other version, and that's why the word only is there at mainstream. Now, how come explode the wave on plus is from waves only? Because there's an explode the line somewhere else, but you wouldn't know that and people get really upset if you say, well, didn't you know that? It's in the advanced preface. Well, they're like, I don't need to read the advanced preface to dance mainstream. So that's why some of those limitations are there. Here's a harder question. Why is past the ocean from facing couples only? Because. So we're going to get all that on the tape. Do you want me to say it or do you want to say it? Yep. So the question again, why is past the ocean, say, from facing couples only?
Technically, you can do it from a right-handed ocean wave, but to do it from a left-handed ocean wave, you'd actually have to step out of the ocean wave and make it a right-handed setup so that you could then pass through right shoulders and face into the partner.
Okay, there's an opinion.
Pass through the right-handed call. There's a right shoulder pass always.
Correct. So we wouldn't want to call pass through from a left-hand wave. I believe that's improper. We can call pass through from facing dancers. We can call pass through from a right-hand mini wave, not from a left-hand mini wave. We could call left pass through, or perhaps we could say step through. Or, now this is treading on shakier stuff, one could call extend, which I've heard callers use. To get out of a tidal wave, some callers will say extend. I personally would prefer step through, but whatever. I think the reason past the ocean is restricted to facing couples only is because it just was never done from a right-hand ocean wave. From a right-hand ocean wave, the dance action is the exact same as locket. And locket's on the advanced list. And so the number of the amount of times you want to call past the ocean from what time are we done here, by the way? We've run over. I just saw someone poke their head in and wonder, why are we still here? So let's wrap this up. So the reason on, as long as, if you wanted to call past the ocean from an ocean wave, as soon as you're calling it advanced, you just call it locket, and from then on out, no one's ever going to call it past the ocean. So there's just that little window, and I think it was never done. Therefore, the people who documented it said it can't be done. I think that's one that could go away, especially since there's a corresponding sister call past the sea, and past the sea is done from ocean waves on occasion. It turns a right-hand wave into a left-hand wave. It's a cross-locket, effectively. But whether we could change that definition and remove that restriction, and would the plus committee vote in favor of that, it's hard to know. That's kind of a minor thing. You have a question?
By the time it gets here, I've got CRS. I can't remember stuff, and by the time it gets here, I forget. No, but the valid point that you'd have to back up into facing couples out of a lefty wave if you said it can be done from ocean waves, right?
Yeah, I agree we can't do it from a left-hand ocean wave, but
Okay.
I don't think we're even talking about that. If it said from a right, not allowed from a left-hand ocean wave, I'd be fine, but the plus people do not even want it from a right-hand ocean wave.
Oh, I see.
Yes. Okay, I want to give my usual concluding remark that I gave a year ago, which is everything we talked about in this room is interesting to us, and it will not bring one more dancer into square dancing or entertain one more dancing one whit. So what's that get back to? We need the caller judgment and all that other stuff. We'll keep plugging away on getting the better mainstream definitions out, but those are more things talking about stuff between you and me and not what we're going to be doing to the dancers. So the important thing is to get dancers out and entertain them any way you can, but it's probably not the stuff we're talking about in this room. Okay? Thank you very much.
Have a good one.